Hi, my name is Alex Jackson, and I'll be real with you. This is not the first intro I have done for this. In fact, I decided to do this intro at the end of actually finishing it because I realized, as I was going through it, I realized, hey, the topic wasn't exactly always mental health with students. It was a combination topic that I ended up engaging with. It wasn't just mental health, it was about student identity, it was about working through who we are and having space for that in the class and how to do that and how to do that at certain different levels. And it was a few anecdotes here and there about my time teaching college doing it. There was a lot of things to it, as you'll see as you watch this video. But I guess to call it simply just mental health, it might not be exactly accurate if you're asking me what my issue is that I'm working on here. It's mental health, but it's also student identity, and it's also how do we spend that time and what's the right way to do it in the classroom. And that's part of what this introduction is about. It's part of what this whole thing is about. Is how do we do student mental health? How do we care openly? How do we provide space and time to really get after it? And really talk to our students, and what kind of classroom does that look like, things like that. So what you're going to see is me tackling a few issues subtitled as we go, surrounding mental health and student identity and all that good stuff, like communal space in schools. Again, my name is Alex Jackson, and this is for EDU 3910, critical thinking, with Professor Saunders. So I hope you enjoy. I mean, it could very well be possible that by the end of this, you're probably like, why didn't this dude just write an essay? Thanks. Again, just to be clear, what I know about it right now is that there is certainly a focus now, and certainly more so than I have ever experienced in my studies when I was a student, and in the experience of students that I've spoken to at the collegiate level. They would say that this is not a common experience. That is talking about your not necessarily like your clinical issues, but talking about how you react to stuff, how that thing makes you feel, how you're coping with everything you're facing. And as I said in the intro, that's becoming more and more the norm, it seems. But nonetheless, I feel like it's not being adopted as quickly as it should be. With that being said, that opinion being noted, one of the things I do want to do is I want to take you through some of the sources that I'm going to reference as we go here. I'm going to take you through them directly. I'm going to like sort of picture myself, so you can see my direct screen and my face, just so you know that I'm still alive and doing it. So I do apologize. I know the webcam's really grainy. I apologize for that, but I hope you can follow me on this. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is actually an American, Illinois-based school and what they see as a mental health day versus, and then we'll compare and contrast what I think of it as. So I'm going to work through it with you as if we're just sitting together, reading over the article at the same time. So here we go. Here is one look at mental health in Illinois. So you should be able to see this right here now. So we're here on NPR. .org, and we're looking at kids in Illinois will soon be able to take 5 mental health days from school. So I guess the idea is that they get sick days at their disposal, right? So students across Illinois will be able to take up to 5 excused mental health days starting in January. This was written in January 2020 or September 2021, so very current. And students across Illinois, will be able to take it starting in January. So under a bill, we don't need to necessarily get in the details of America. But having this now for all students across the state will be really beneficial, especially with what's going on with COVID, said Republican Barbara Hernandez, who co-sponsored the bill. She said many students feel stressed and have developed anxiety and depression because they're not able to see teachers and friends and may have lower grades due to remote learning. Now, I think that that's 100% factual on every level there that I think students feel more stressed. I think students they feel their anxiety and their depression more, and I think that they frequently have lower grades. I know that the online only side of things has been a bit of a challenge for me too, keeping everything straight. Different instructors use so many different little ways of communicating and ways of receiving assignments and so on. Like in this course, we email the assignments. That's fine, no big deal. In other courses, we have to submit them directly through D2L, and in other courses, there's still other methods. So when I look at like having lower grades due to remote learning, yeah, that's a real thing. And not to mention, of course, too, and this is in person or through digital. This is true either way, but different teaching styles really do come across differently when you're in remote learning. Like, for example, I have professors that are asynchronous, like this one, who, Professor Saunders gets across, like, some good vibes and some pleasant, like, correspondence. There's happy faces in there. It's always nice to see, because that at least suggests some care for the mental health and mental well-being of students. But it's not always that way, right? Some profs very detached with their asynchronous or with their synchronous teaching. There's a different level of attachment that you can achieve and that certain instructors want to achieve in the digital space. And I do think that has something to say about it, something to say about the experience of mental health in school. So I think they're right on target saying, here's the things that students are going through. When they say many students feel stressed and develop anxiety and depression, I think that's right on target. Now, and then interestingly enough, one of the notations of the article is that psychologist says that more and more students are going to need help, different kinds of help. And let's pop over quickly, if we can, to that article once again. And then, interestingly enough, one of the notations of the article is that psychologist says that more and more students are going to need help, different kinds of help. And let's pop over quickly, if we can, to that article once again. That's not it. So, okay, we're back over at this article again, and one thing that is worthy of note is that child psychiatrists say that they expect children will need more help because of everything around COVID. But I really don't think it's just about COVID. That's the point that really I want to drive home, is that so much of the mental health will use COVID as its like staging ground for talking about it, for having an article about it, and that's fine. Like, kind of whatever gets you there is fine in my opinion, but I really want to be like forthright in saying, like, look, we needed help. We needed this to matter before COVID, right? And they go through some stats, and these are American stats. I'm not going to belabor on them too much, but it's clear that the numbers have grown in terms of how people react mentally to things. But again, there's a difference between what I'm looking at and what I think of mental health and engaging with it in the classroom versus what they're proposing here. So I'm gonna pull back from this side of it. Give me just 1 second. Sorry, you're seeing all the inner workings here. Let's go to webcam only. Okay, so thanks. This is part of the problem, I guess, with this medium, but it's okay. I enjoy doing it. So what I want to say is, while that article talks about, like, hey, we want to give 5 mental health days to students, like they can just take 5 days auto-excused for mental health reasons, personal reasons, whatever the heck they need to do, and that's fine. And I think, yeah, like, bravo, that's pretty dang cool. That's the kind of flexibility that we should allow for. Some days students are just like, F it. They would, like, would rather be anywhere else. And to be honest, like, maybe it's not a good thing to give them like carte blanche on that kind of stuff. But maybe that would reduce the amount of skips that you'd see, because they know, hey, I have 5 mental health days, I'll just take one now instead of skipping out. And there'll be some other protocol around that remains to be seen. I guess that's something I need to look more at the article directly with you. But for me, like, I'm not even talking about let's be out of the classroom. That's all fine. Like, I think that's great, but that's not what I'm about. What I'm about is how can we make the classroom dedicate time to mental health. And like I said, in my experience educating at the college level, the way I did that was simple. In place of just an icebreaker for a lesson, I was just like, all right, hit me in the chat, and this is digital. Like, this is me talking digital to my students in like a Zoom call or whatever. I said, hit me up in the chat or on mic. What do you have that's stressing you out right now? And like, put it in there. And then so all these things drop in: biology exam, my mark in this and that, or how I'm gonna get through subject versus verb quiz. And because I was a writing teacher, that stuff perks my ears up too, because that's valuable information as well. But not only that, people feel heard, right? Because I'm going through and I'm reading them live. I'm like, biology exam, oh yeah, I feel that. When's that due? And they're like, oh, that's tomorrow. And I'm like, oh man, like, best of luck. Do you feel prepared? How did you study? And I'm not trying to spend like 25 gazillion minutes on this. Like, so it is quick, and it is quick fire back and forth. But I've done this twice at the college level now. And the response from students is kind of mind blowing, because they're like, wow, like, wait, you're actually asking us about our lives? Like, what? We thought we would just get right into locating the subject in a sentence, or prepping for our essay paper, or whatever, right? They really just thought that was gonna just be how it went, and taking the 10 minutes before the class even really gets the gears going to just talk to these people like human beings, it's a major effect, I find. And that's what drives me forward here. That's what I want to talk about, and that's what I think, at least in the Illinois article, is somewhat driving towards that, I guess, in a good way. That being said, though, when we look at it again, let's pop back to it. Let's go school project. Let's go bang here. So the new law is designed to help kids get care. Really excited for this. I think it will help students, parents, and teachers, help them understand what's going on in their students' life. Yeah, I mean, this is one thing. Like, this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like, yeah, that's one way to help students to help you understand what's going on in a student's life, sure. But in the end, you're still not doing it the best way that you could, which I believe is directly asking them. Like, you can give them mental health days, but another good way to know what's going on in your student's life is just to ask them. Just to actually care. Just to actually stop and say, like, yo, what is up with life lately? And if you can develop that relationship to the point where they're going to tell you they're stressed out about an exam, well, heck, that's plus, right? And there's nothing I can do. Like, I can't go and, make their exam less stressful, but what I can do is take into account the energy of stress that's around my class, and then adjust accordingly. And that's frankly, that's what I did. Now, before I get too deep in any given section of discussion here, the point that I'm trying to make too, though, is that, yeah, I've done this in a college atmosphere, and that's way different. Okay, that's way different than intermediate senior. So one of my focuses is, like, with this assignment, is what can we learn about how to do, like, interactive, direct communication about mental health in high school and grade 7-8. How can we do it there? What does it look like there? That's one of my interests, one of my passions, and really what the focus of my position paper is. So again, we're looking at the Illinois article here, though, that says, hey, let's get five mental health days. And again, I just need to state that this still does differ from what I would believe to be the best approach. You want to find out what's going on in their student's life, then ask them. Ask them and make them feel supported about what they're going through, right? And we see that several states have taken similar approaches. Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Maine, Nevada, Oregon, Virginia. Gotta find some more detail on Canada and Ontario in specific if I can, and that's going to come in future sections of the video. But for now, it's good to see a change. It's good to see a shift. It's good to see the value of mental health. But a few issues I have here, and just to summarize them with this article, one is that you're giving them time off school rather than allowing school to become a place where that mental health is a focus, and it is allowed and is accepted and is brought in and is discussed and is, maneuvered through. And then secondly, you're also sort of just like displacing the issue in a way, because it's like, oh, we'll let them spend time dealing with what they need to deal with at home, and maybe their parents will learn what's going on. Well, yeah, maybe they will, but maybe they'll just take a mental health day and go smoke weed. Like, I don't, and maybe, I don't use the substance myself, but the point being is, if you're giving time off, and who knows how they're going to spend it, well, why don't we have them in front of us, giving them time off in a way, but inside the classroom, time off from like assignments and rigors, and time to just talk about what their life is like. And we'll say more about this going forward. Okay, so we've taken a look at one source, and we see the ways in which that source differs from what I think about as being important concerning mental health in the classroom. But there are other sources that lean more towards what I think about when I'm talking about engaging with mental health in the classroom. And I'm going to pull up one of those sources now. It's called, pardon my switching here. You're not seeing it yet, but you will. It's called Classroom Mental Health, believe it or not, a teacher's toolkit for high school. So it's very, very interesting to see this, because I had been wondering exactly how to approach mental health discussions and maneuvers and things like that, and like trying to teach mental health and trying to make it okay in the classroom. I've been wondering how to do that in high school, because I recognize that the college experience is not the same. So let me pop over here. You're gonna see me in the recording area, but here we go. Should be able to see it now. So now it goes through the sort of preamble, but before it talks about the climate in the classroom, this source is interesting because it does break the mental health movement as a teacher in the classroom down to two key areas. One is, in fact, that climate of the classroom, and the other is connections between thoughts and feelings. Now, I want to start with the connections because I think there's some interesting points here. So, it talks about these approaches and things you can do with your class being based in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's about controlling your feelings and actions. And as somebody with anxiety and depression, I've used CBT and use CBT directly in my life as much as I need to. Now, one of the things that prioritizes that CBT is really good at is to try to break habits, right? And to tell us that we can take on situations in different ways. We can divide ourselves from our thoughts. We're not necessarily our thoughts if we don't want to be. We might have down thoughts. We might have self-deprecating thoughts. We might have all kinds of issues. And what's important about CBT is that it allows anyone really to sort of get a handle on those things, I feel like. Now, before I get into some more stuff here, this site talks about a few interesting things: situations, thoughts, feelings, behaviors. Those are the major subjects, okay? But what's interesting again about this is geared towards high school on purpose. So it offers two examples for situations. For example, let's take a look. This one is called Time Cruncher, and what Time Cruncher purports to do is you get students to agree to sign up to do a 24-hour worksheet, 24-hour clock worksheet, where they list they plug in the number of time they devoted to every activity they did or could think of in that day. They're then asked to prioritize it, and a lot of times you'll see that they request getting less sleep, or that they don't get 9 hours of sleep. And now you can discuss that with them and move through it this way. Now, this is interesting. It's very targeted. It's very specific, I should say. And I think, again, where my issue lands is not that I think... it's not that I think what I did in college was better, quote unquote. It's just that I think it was less clinical, and there's something about this that just seems a bit clinical to me, in terms of, it's like, okay, let's list everything you do in a day, where can you improve, how can you get more time to do stuff, things like that. It's like, yeah, that's useful, but that's more like personal management, whereas I'm like more so thinking of like, okay, I'm not looking to give you the best answer or the best tools when we talk about mental health, but I'm just looking to hear you, give you a space to talk, and a space we can listen in, right? Now, you can see that the focus is also on thoughts here too. So, but again, it's about identifying automatic thoughts, right? It's about who owns the thoughts. Like, are we our thoughts? These are classic CBT questions, right? But again, it verges on like the clinical in a certain way. What I mean is this: we're still assigning worksheets, right? Thoughts and feelings worksheet. So again, my issue here is that we're turning mental health discussions, we're turning them into products, which in and of itself is sort of defeating what I think the purpose of like a mental health period in class is supposed to be. It's not that we want you to loaf around and do nothing, but it's just that when you look at what really defines like hearing somebody, their identity, their struggles, I don't think it's about doing a worksheet. I really just don't. And there's a lot of good stuff in this section. There really is. You know, worksheets, good things you can actually use, productive like measures that you can actually take with students to address mental health. I think that's important. I really do. But again, I think we're just missing the mark. And it's missing the mark because it's still trying to get a product out of these things, right? Like, what if we go to automatic thoughts homework? Yeah, again, thought and feeling worksheet, right? Now, I like this 15 minutes of class time. But again, we just see sort of that repeat focus, that worksheet, right? That is the continual driving. Let's see if we can pull the worksheet up. I haven't taken a look at this in advance. So, let's see what the worksheet is like. Write down a difficult or stressful situation that you might have to face in the week, or one that seems to happen to you often. Now name 2 or 3 automatic thoughts that have occurred when facing this or similar situations in the past. For each of these automatic thoughts, list a feeling or a feeling that will trigger. If a feeling it will trigger. Now list 5 coping thoughts that will help you feel better if the situation happens. Okay, so this is actually pretty decent, right? I'm not gonna sit here and say like, oh, this is so off base. No, this is actually decent. This is something similar that I ended up doing in the college courses, where I said like, hey, in the chat, tell me something that's stressing you out, right? The difference being is that I think what troubles me still about this is that we're still trying to like diagnose and solve the problem by saying, here are some coping mechanisms that you can use. Here are some ways you can defeat the struggle. But the reality for me is like part of mental health discussion is not even necessarily trying to solve it, but just hearing it, being in it, allowing it to be a thought process, allowing yourself to share who you are, and not necessarily saying, I need to get better, I want to get better, this is how I do it. Yeah, there's a place for that, but I really believe that school mental health, it needs to take on a less school-ish kind of vibe, and a more communal kind of vibe. So this is actually not a bad exercise in terms of like how to get at the core of what the issue is. But again, while it's appropriate for high school and it does produce a product you can turn back to and say, hey, we did this, we talked about this, and I would definitely consider using it with the right appropriate age group, it's still not that like that golden goose that I'm really looking for and that I myself couldn't achieve when I started, which is how can we just make a community out of mental health discussions in the classroom. So I'll say more about that as we go forward to the next source, but not a bad effort. But again, I just think it's still just not exactly there. Maybe I'm just pipe dreaming. So it's worth noting that I wrapped up talking last time about what I thought about classroom mental health in terms of the things I liked about this site and its suggestions, and the things that I struggled with. And one of the things that I did struggle with was the fact that, you know, it was always trying to create like a product, a worksheet, a homework out of these things. And I get that that's maybe part of the vessel of schooling. But the reset button I stumbled upon from the same site, I just wanted to take a moment to mention this because this is really like right on line with what I would really hope to see in schools. What this is a kind of a little cute little gimmicky thing, but it does get across what I'm looking for. So let me just read through some of this here. So here's what they want you to do. They want you to create some visual aid for an actual reset button, like you'd have on a Nintendo 64 or video game consoles, a Super Nintendo. You know, you just flick that switch and boom, it shuts off and restarts. Now, what is interesting to me here is that they talk about at some point during the class, the teacher is going to say, okay, we're going to stop everything that we're doing and we're going to hit the reset button. Now, during the reset button, here's the important part for what I'm looking at, which is mental health action in the classroom. The great part about this is you ask your students to think about one situation or person that concerns them the most in the moment. Perhaps it's an upcoming test, a social event, problems at home, etc. They don't have to share, which is key. So ask them just to think about it. Then ask students to rank their current stress level on 1 to 10, with 10 being totally freaked out about it. Then engage the students in a mind relaxation exercise. And it lists some options. One thing I did with again, referring back to my college examples from personal experience, was I just played 5 minutes of rain on a window and just ask people to just think about things and just take a breath, and I felt that was hugely appreciated and hugely successful in kind of getting us in the right frame of mind, especially if you can sense there's a lot of tension in the class and a lot of struggle with other things outside the class, because it becomes really hard to learn, I feel, and people I've talked to have basically corroborated it becomes hard to learn when your mind's somewhere else always, right? Or you're worried about something, or whatever. There's so many different little things in each human's experience that makes it so that learning becomes more of a challenge than it otherwise needs to be. Rare is the student, in fact I would say non-existent is the student who can actually shut everything off and just purely care about what's going on in the classroom. So I think this reset button's so right on with what I would like to see happening in schools more. It's let's stop, let's think, let's talk where we're able to, and let's take a breath about whatever it is that you've got going on, and then after that you ask them to refocus. This is beautiful. This is exactly what you want. This is exactly what I want anyway. And I'm glad to see that something like this is out here, because I was getting kind of jaded looking through this when I was doing these videos. I was getting a little jaded thinking, man, they're all about, oh, fill out this worksheet, do that, do this. It's that's not even... That's you're still missing the issues. You're still... But here, this is what you want. Okay. I'm a rambler, I know. I promise I'll edit this. But for now, this is great. I'm all for the reset button idea and how they present it. So one of the One of the interesting things I've found as I dig through more of the mental health sort of options out there with as it concerns teaching and schools and classrooms, one thing I notice is that I think sometimes my definition of mental health and how we treat it and how we work with it has more to do with identity than maybe some other formations of like working through mental health. So I've shown a few that they drive home like coping mechanisms and things like that, and they talk about how to process issues you might be facing. Whereas for me, I actually think a lot of the time just getting to know somebody on a personal level actually does affect mental health successes and like their ability to share those realities with you. And I think it's like one and the same thing in a way. Whereas I feel like a lot of these sites I've been looking into, they seem to be more about, again, like here's some breathing techniques, here's some worksheets, here's some this and that. Whereas for me, I'm going to show you what I mean here. And this isn't exactly, these aren't the questions I exactly used, and this is like a super old website apparently. But I still just want to pull up some types of the questions that I would ask students to consider when I'm taking like a mental health day with them, which is to say a mental health class. Like one day of my class out of the calendar year would be like about this, or the every 6 months or whatever it would be. Let me switch to this here, and then you're probably gonna see that, yeah. And then you're gonna see my email most likely. Oops. So, where did I put that? So, as I said, these aren't the questions I would actually ask necessarily, and this isn't the source I used when I taught it myself. But I do think some of these questions are extremely important because it's not just about like coping with your runaway thoughts or coping with your psychological issues. It's also about like finding out who students are as people, and I think that's a distinction that sometimes isn't made. Not that I shouldn't say it's a distinction that isn't made properly. What I mean is rather to say it this way. Um, I think when we talk about mental health, we very often over focus on the clinical and under focus on the personal. So what I mean by that is we really should take some time to think about questions that might inspire personal reflection. So, for example, I would ask a question like this in my class: if you found that you only had 120 days to live, how would you spend it? And I think I asked something similar to that in my college class. Now, that's in a college class. I don't feel bad asking about that death-related stuff. In high school class, I probably wouldn't. I might rather say in a high school class where self appreciation can sometimes be rare, I would probably take a more positive stance and say, okay, how do you feel right now? Like, what's your current state of mind? And if it's good, great. And if it's not, let's talk about it, you know? Or I might consider, what's your greatest achievement, you know? Or I might consider, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? The classic question, like, what do you want to be? What career do you see yourself having? Right? Any thoughts about that? And then I would also want to demystify something like not knowing what career you want being a negative, right? I think a lot of people grew up being not knowing what they wanted to do, and nobody really told them that that was okay. That you could figure it out. Um, but so that's part of it, right? Now, again, a lot of these questions aren't relevant, but I think some of these are. What two qualities do you most admire in people? And I think that's important because you can reflect, do I have those? Right? Okay, let's say a student says, I really admire people being funny. Okay. But I really admire people that are nice to me. It's like, okay, well, if they're a bully, then maybe they'll turn inside and say, man, what am I doing here? Um, but more importantly than that, I remember when I was teaching in college, courses, I had asked students, what they want to get out of their education, and I had one student say, "I don't think I want to be in this program anymore, to be honest." And I've been thinking that, but I haven't ever said that out loud because this and that. And it's funny that I would be in the program, in a class in the program, and then feel comfortable saying it now. And we all had like a good vibe about it. We're like, wow, that's it's gutsy to say that. Especially with me as the instructor, it's like at a moment I'm like, do I need to do I need to transfer the student to save the sale? If you understand my meaning, you know what I mean. But I very quickly dismissed that and thought, okay, no, this is what we need. We need to hear where the doubt comes from. What do they want to do with their life? Should they be encouraged to pursue that versus what they're currently doing? And these kinds of discussions are the ones that they don't really expect to have. That student in particular, I remember her saying like, "Oh, I feel so much better now that I said that out loud." It's like, yeah, that's a huge part of it. And a lot of that process can be handled by like a psychologist and things like that. I get that, like part of that speaking process. But I do think it's powerful if you do it in a group as well. And I think a lot of questions, like some of these, lead to those great moments, right? Like this: at what time in your life were you the happiest that you could remember being? Right? And then when you ask something like that, students will trace it, find it, and then maybe they might wonder why they don't do more of it, or maybe they might, try to triangulate their life around some option. Hopefully what they chosen is healthy, like not like being under the influence or something like that. But you never know. That being said, again, my point in this segment here is to say, when I talk about mental health days, I'm talking about, yes, talking about stress, talking about struggles, talking about coping. That's fine. There's tons of resources on that. But I just don't think there's a lot of, let's talk about you without attaching a product to it, in view of how can we build a more comfortable community that can lead us to mental health, like strong mental health environments, right? So this is like a multi part process, and I just think there's that personal element, those personal questions, those questions like what your favorite color is, and if you could travel to one place, where would it be, and what's one thing you don't want to do, what's one thing you do want to do with your life, what's one thing you don't want to do with your life, you know what I mean? These kinds of questions about the how and why of it, and matter, right? Because it's like we're all here just like grinding, getting money, getting degrees, getting whatever, getting work done, whatever it is, and then sometimes you just kind of lose sight about what it actually means to do the things we're doing. And one of the things I said to the students was, yo, like, when I was in, and I probably actually did say when I was in anxiety class, they asked me, or they told me about the two modes of being, and the one of those modes is task oriented, when we spend like 90% of our life there, and one of the other one is what would it be? And no student knew the answer, and probably it was a confusing question. But when I revealed that the answer was the other mode is being, and that was divergent from task, you started to see like these light bulbs pop up, right? Because task oriented is so much what school's about. Task oriented is so much what work is about. And very often it becomes easy to just forget that you're a living creature that exists on the planet. And there's some solace to be taken in that. There's some joy to be had in that. There's some special like spirituality in a way to be had from that recognition. And I think we only spend like, I think it was 10% or something of our lives in the recognition of being state, like the in just floating kind of thing. Neither being productive nor unproductive, being like just being a freaking creature. Excuse my language, but like there's something potent in that, And I think the fact that most students don't even realize that that's a distinction that can be made about a human life is like really telling. And I'll get to more of this in my other video, but sorry, in the other section of this video. But I will say that, like, for me, the struggle with the way we run things is task orientation. Like, it's always about that. It's always about what is next on the list to do. It's always about what to read next, what to write next, what to do next. And school is school. I get that. We're not going to radically, like, delete it, reshuffle it, and change it. But man, school could be a lot more welcoming if it had more being in it and less task. And I'm not quite sure how you do that quite yet, but this is something that I want to achieve. So here's an interesting little tidbit of research. So I mentioned just moments ago the existence of doing, like, task oriented versus being, and how that's an important distinction. And something that needs to be sort of like worked through with students, I feel like. And I think it's pretty telling that when I search up doing versus being in school, there's nothing you can really find, at least on a cursory look. Whereas when I search for doing versus being in general, there's tons. But there's nothing specific to school. Nonetheless, I want us to take a look at this site here, which talks about doing versus being in a fairly, like, usefully broken down way. So, qualities of doing mode will include awareness of how things are and how they should be, goal-oriented efforts to fix things, increasingly harder efforts towards reaching goals. Most actions happen automatically, lack of conscious awareness in the present moment. So some of these apply, some don't, but in general, school is this task-oriented function here. Now, qualities of being mode include connection with the present moment, acknowledgement of how things are in the moment, willingness to allow things to be just as they are, no efforts to change and alter them, openness and acceptance of pleasant, neutral, and negative emotions, calmness, stillness, and a sense of being centered. So very, very different approaches here. And I think one thing that the site Mindfulness Muse mentions that I do appreciate is this one here, which is the danger lies in over-identification with either mode or applying the wrong mode of mind for a particular situation. I feel like because of the nature of the world as, like, a capitalist space, a space where product is expected, ever since the fact that we bring kids into school so young, not saying we shouldn't, but I'm saying the fact that we do, that introduces them into doing or task oriented mode right from the jump, and then we stay in that mode for years and years and years and years. And we go through school, we get a degree, and we go through work, and we work a job, and if we're lucky, we work a job for a while that we actually like, and then eventually we retire, and then only then, at like age 60 or something, are we said, like, oh, like, are we said to have earned the right to, like, not do something? You know what I mean? To not have large goals that need doing, or life trajectories, or whatever the case, right? Like, I'm saying, like, senior citizen people who, you know, you get to go out for Thanksgiving dinner and enjoy that, and you don't have a job, and you don't have, you know, necessarily all those same concerns. Isn't it kind of messed up in a way, like, philosophically speaking, that this line here that Mindfulness Muse references, the danger lies in over-identification. Over-identification. Aren't we exactly doing that? I think we're, like, exactly doing that. We have over-identified our entire young population with doing mode. And earlier on in the video, that's one of the reasons why I made such a big to-do about this idea that these mental health aspects had worksheets. Like, think about that name, worksheet. That's messed up. So in that space, we're asking people to consider their mental health, but we're still expecting that product. And this is why that's a problem, is because we're already inundated with doing mode and have been so for years. If I see a if I spoke to a college student, they've already been stuck in doing mode with school alone for over a decade, let alone whatever jobs they had and what have you. In that respect, it's like not a surprise that we lose being mode so uniformly throughout our lives. And I think this is something that's really going to stick with me from this research, is that, man, there is very little space for just being in modern society, and that includes school. Okay, so while my spiel on being mode versus task mode and the way that the school is driven by task mode and the way that it therefore, the implication being that it therefore, like, necessarily is not invested in a student's well-being, because for as long as it contains task mode, it's going to push students away from just being able to be as human beings, and I do think that's a problem. For having said that, part of the assignment for assignment 2 is to reflect on other ideas. So one of the things that concerns me about my own ideas regarding like mental health and, you know, building relationships with students and things like that is the time usage in class. And so I did a bit of searching, and I came across essentially what seems like a blog, but I think this one just resonates with me. I think it's fairly well done. It's a little snarky, but I mean, I think it gets the point across. So let's take a look at that here, because this is a concern that I do have as well. So let's just take a quick gander, and we'll take it from there. So this website, Coastal Conservatory, this article is by Reagan Ram back in 2015. Reagan's responding to a series of issues that she's talked about. And Reagan says this part here. She says that, however, in pretty much every class I've been in, only about half the class is actually spent on instruction. What I've learned about teachers is that they like to talk. I may have had to teach myself most of honors algebra 2, but I did learn a lot about my teacher's personal life, credit card debt, and opinions on social issues. For example, she once expressed that she didn't think it was right that a woman should have to take the name of her husband when married. This led to class time being consumed with a debate on that issue, not mathematics. Debate is nice, but not when you're paying a lot of taxes to be taught math. What was especially frustrating was when we get to the end of the class time and the teacher hadn't finished teaching all the material, she would blame us for being too talkative and then just tell us to figure out the rest of the material for ourselves and do homework. See, I've actually had this happen where, like, we would get assigned a worksheet in French because we didn't get the course finished, the day tasks finished, but I feel like that should have been on the teacher now that I look back at it. But the article goes on to say, like, you know, in public school this is an issue too. So I do have this issue. Like, I do have this concern that I guess like, my concern is the more we talk about ourselves, the more we potentially use up time, the more teachers talk. Like, look at this video. I have to sort of, like, talk through my like, thought processes on everything, and, you know, maybe it would have been more efficient if I just wrote an essay on this, and maybe I just wanted to hear myself talk. Like, that's all fairly reasonable. I don't know. I like to think it wasn't for that reason, but nonetheless, like, this concern is significant, and even though I was critical of some of the ways that the previous site I mentioned, we'll actually go take another look back at it right here. It was the site about so yeah, while I was critical of this site's reliance on like worksheets in mental health, I do think it's important for me to recognize that some of what I'm supporting and some of what I'm saying probably would need to be truncated into, charts and things like that we can actually work through. Stuff like this, right? Thought, feeling, issue that's stressful. Write it on a piece of paper. Like, for example, here it says, not only should you put your well-being focus on the syllabus, what about this? What if we talked about coping skills for your homework that's coming up tonight, and we listed 5 to 10 coping skills, and we circle each skill, and we want to come up with a healthier alternative, and we ask them to do worksheets and all this. I have the first instinct, even when I'm reading through this, you can see how I'm like rushing it and making it sound laborious. That's because I really like tire of the worksheet and things like that, but I recognize that if I don't at least put something productive adjacent to well-being, then maybe it is just like the blog said. Maybe it is just excuse me, teachers talking, right? Maybe it's just about that. And so I think there's a better happy medium than what I'm talking about, where it's like, let's find out about our students, let's engage them, let's tell them to chill, let's talk to them about their lives, about their struggles, about their stresses, about their interests, about all this stuff, while there's time to do that stuff. And I think that stuff is valuable, and I'm gonna go to my deathbed believing that that's one of the major changes we can make. It would be like super dishonest of me not to like admit that we need to really like truncate and centralize some of this stuff. And honestly, that sometimes doing it through a worksheet is the right way to do it. See if we can get another look at one of these worksheets, even though I was making fun of them earlier. And I apologize if I come across that way. It's just, I do have a feeling, I do have a belief, as I've said. So here's the situation worksheet, helping them work through a situation. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so describe a situation you recently experienced that was difficult for you, either upsetting or made you nervous. Use the cognitive behavioral therapy flow shape. That's interesting. Fill in boxes. You're getting authentic reactions, by the way, because I like to look this stuff up as we go. I think it's part of the fun. Fill in the boxes 1 through 4 describing what happened. So thoughts box, situation box, feeling box, behavior box. Then looking back on the situation, answer the following. Were your thoughts reasonable, logical? Did your behavior make the situation better, worse, no different? Okay, so that one I might not necessarily like jive with so much, but this one you could see the variety and the rationale behind it. What's the issue that I have here? I think it's asking a lot. It's asking a lot of like internal reflection and honesty for a high school student. Like, a lot of the time the students are doing these things because to them it's logical, right? Like, they're not even operating on the premise of logical and reasonable. Their premise is something else. The premise is fun. Their premise is risk. Their premise is endorphin, like whatever it is, like there's so much driven by its social impact, romance, whatever the rationale for their action, their behavior was. It's not often logical or reasonable. And so this is what I have trouble with here. I think it's a bit ham-fisted for high school students to think that they're just going to be like, yeah, it wasn't logical. Duh. Some might, of course. There's one in every bunch, or a few in every bunch. But I guess my point being is still though is that I need to really learn that school is still going to be about doing. And no matter how much I want to radicalize and shift it and move it to a relationship-based thing, or move it to like identity driving, identity as the main driver of mental health and all that. And I want to take a time out of class to do this stuff. The reality is things still have to get done, and we just can't be like sitting in a circle and like talking about life the way like Socrates did, you know, or something. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of pipe dreamy. So I recognize that, and I think that one of the changes that I would need to make, or that I should make in my approach toward the way I view mental health and establishment of student identity and respect of student identity development and stuff like that, it is going to need to come in these formations sometimes. It is going to need to produce something to show somebody higher up than me that, you know, we didn't just waste, you know, our time. And I think it can still be effective. And the way I presented it before, I probably didn't present it as such, and I think that is a problem. So I think that is the way when I hypothetically work and rework it in my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, like the more I talk about this on the video, the more I realize, okay, it does need some structure. It does need something, right? Just a matter of finding the right one. I don't necessarily believe that this is the right one here out in front of us, but nonetheless, you can see kind of where it's going or what it's going for. And again, props to classroommentalhealth.org for actually coming up with sheets that could be relevant in school for high school students. Like, it's one of the only sources I've seen about high school student mental well-being and welfare, and like how to deal with it and how to process it and how to talk and whatever. So it's fairly comprehensive website, so props for that. And again, for me, it's just a matter of like synthesizing through, okay, some of the stuff you just have to do. Simple as that. And another thing I need to say too is it's not just COVID, right? This is the big thing for me, is it's not just about COVID. And I think a lot of mental health discussions, understandably, they begin with that, they work with that, they are part of that process, but it's not just because of COVID that we need to give 5 days of mental health leave. It's not just because COVID that we should rally our horses up, corral them up, and start teaching them mental health. It's not like that. So I kind of get edgy on the COVID stuff because I feel like it's the topic for a reason, but let's not lose sight of what this really is about. This is more than COVID, and if we only think it's a COVID thing, then maybe we think, oh, we can repeal these when COVID's gone. No. No, these kinds of things, we need to start doing them in every class, in every situation, like in every course, I should say, in every situation, and we need to find ways to do it properly in high school and elementary school. We need to show students that they care. And I've been on record with this course and other courses where I said, like, you know, people not caring about the things I was going through identity wise as a disabled man, it was like made school so much worse. Like, so much worse. And it wasn't that they didn't care, it wasn't that they were negative, right? It's just that they didn't ask, didn't care, they didn't put it together that I could be having issues that, like, about who I was and stuff. Instead, they just happen to think that, you know, I just sucked at geography or whatever, right? Like, I've been through the story, but my point being is that this is not just a flavor of the month thing, and I know it's not for education, but I really hope that some of the major sweeping changes we're seeing don't just rest on that COVID ground always, because that's too easy to pull the rug out from under when it's all said and done. So I guess my argument too, like one of my hopes is like, let's keep the engine running on it, because we really need to be able to burn those tires out and leave a mark. You know what I mean? Like, this needs to matter, and it needs to stick. So there's my bad metaphor for the end of this video. I hope I covered it. I really enjoyed doing this. I think I learned a lot about it, and I'm challenging my own opinions about worksheets and things, and how do I approach it, and is it just because I like to hear myself talk and blah blah blah. There's like a lot of interesting questions, right? And I don't think I addressed them all. I don't think I answered them all, but I at least know where I stand on the issue. And given that it's a position paper, I will firmly state right here, right now, that I believe mental health and identity in the classroom needs a space in classrooms at a regular interval. I think once every 3 months we should wipe a slate of classes out and just say it's mental health day. Like how you do like a field trip or guest speaker day, or whatever it is, or track and field day, get out of class early for football day, like whatever it is. We need that, but for like mental health, where we're actually just like, oh, today we learn more about each other. Today I learn more about my students. Today they learn more about themselves. I don't think you can put a price on that, and I don't think that you need a reason for that. Let's just get it done. All right, that's enough of me. You probably had enough of me, and I don't blame you. So, I've been Alex Jackson. This has been a video for EDU 3910 Critical Thinking. See ya.